Hello, guys, and welcome to our week 7, which will tackle the topic about using stored procedures. First, what are stored procedure or what is a stored procedure? A stored procedure is a set of TSQL statements or SQL statements that is compiled and stored as a single database object for later repetitive use. It is equivalent of a subroutine or function in other programming language. Now, stored procedures can be, as the name implies, are procedures or steps or instructions that are stored inside our database object in order for us to repetitively use it. Now, there are different uses of a stored procedure. It can be used to generate reports through select statements. It can be used in order for us to add, update, or delete data from our tables in our database. It could also be used to um, back up our database, restore our database, check certain objects in our database. Okay, the functions or the uses are almost limitless. Now, a stored procedure has the following anatomy or structure. It has composition, it has functionality, and it has syntax. Okay. When we say composition, a stored procedure consists of a header and a body. A header contains the name of the stored procedure, the input and output parameters or variables, and some miscellaneous processing option. You can think of it as an API or application programming interface or the declaration of the stored procedure. Now, a body contains one or more SQL statements to be executed at runtime. How do we create a stored procedure? A stored procedure can be created using the syntax. This is for SQL Server using the syntax create procedure, procedure name, followed by the parameter, which could either be an input or output parameter, followed by the keyword as, followed by our SQL statements. MySQL also has this form or structure. However, the difference is that under MySQL, sometimes we have to declare delimiters or symbols that will be used as line terminator. So that is just the difference. But the main syntax, the header, and the body are the same. So in our example, we will use the following table structure. So the following is an example of stored procedure. Stored procedure PR, equipment get. We have an input parameter. Input parameter meaning we will provide the value for this particular variable. Take note, when we are declaring a variable in our SQL code, we make use of the at symbol followed by the variable name followed by the data type. And then after that, we use the keyword as, and then we use begin and end to symbolize that this is the beginning and ending of our stored procedure, or the beginning and ending of our stored procedure body. Inside our stored procedure body, we have select asterisk from table equipment where make is equals to the value of variable chb make. So let us copy this code. I have already prepared the table. Okay, so here is our table. Here is the values of our table. So let us try to execute our code. Okay, so after executing that, notice we now have our stored procedure. This transact SQL statement creates a stored procedure named PR equipment get with one input parameter. This is our input parameter, CHB make. During execution, PR equipment get returns a result set containing all records from the equipment table having a make column equal to the value of the input parameter. If you try to create a stored procedure that already exists in the database, a SQL server will report an error. You can reproduce such an error if you run the same statement for creating a stored procedure twice. This is an error that we can get if we are using an SQL Server Management Studio. But let us try to see if this is almost the same error that we can get using our online compiler. So we already have our stored procedure. So let me try to run it again. Okay, so notice there is already an object name for our equipment getting the database. So same error. One way to change a stored procedure is to drop and recreate it. If you want to make a change or if you want to make changes to your stored procedure, you could just drop the stored procedure and then execute a create procedure command again. There are two ways to prevent the error just described. One way is to use an alter procedure in order for us to prevent in deleting the stored procedure and then creating it again. So you have two options. You could either use drop and then create. Notice, do not forget the syntax or the keyword go. This will say that we need to execute the next line of code. Okay. So instead of using drop and create, we could also use go. So let us try. Sorry, instead of using drop and create, we could also use alter. So first, let's try to make use of alter. Alter command. So run. Okay, so it was successfully updated. So you could also make use of drop and then go. Drop procedure, procedure name, and then create. Never use alter in this example because we have already dropped or deleted or removed the straight procedure, there is nothing to alter, so it will generate an error. So drop, go create, or alter procedure. Error create. So let us remove go. Let's try to use semicolon instead. There's problem with the go statement. Okay. It's not working properly here. So what you could do is you could drop the start procedure by dropping create. But in SQL Server Management Studio, you could just execute this code in one go. So let me show you what will happen if you are to use SQL Server Management Studio. Okay, so we are now inside SQL Server Management Studio. So in SQL Server Management Studio, we could use the go statement or go keyword in order for us to execute batch statements. So drop procedure, create procedure. Okay, cannot create, cannot drop because it does not exist yet. So execute. Okay, so we drop and then we create. We drop and then we create. Now, what is the reason for us to use drop, go, create, or drop, create, and alter? What are the differences between the two? The first difference is that always remember if you are already using your stored procedure or any other database object for that matter, like triggers or functions, remember if you have been using it for a long time, it is better to use the alter procedure simply because inside our database, statistics or data are collected about how fast the execution of your code is, how many times it takes your certain commands to be executed, um, and certain other diagnostics or statistics. If you make or execute your command using drop and create, what happens is that all of those characteristics attached to the object that you are dropping will be removed also. Unlike if you are to use alter, all the statistics of your database object are still preserved. Okay, so if you are managing your database, you are checking about the possibilities of error. It is best error or how you can speed up your database. It is better to use alter. But if you are just executing a new database object, you can make use of drop and create. So that is the difference between the two. So do not forget why there is a need to make use of alter and why there is a need to make use of drop and create. Okay. So as I told you earlier, the syntax for MySQL and SQL Server are almost, again, guys, almost the same. However, in MySQL, instead of using your or instead of placing your parameters after the create procedure command and before the ask keyword, you place your parameter inside the open and close parenthesis, just like when you are programming in C Sharp, in PHP, in Java. Okay, we place our variable inside the open close parenthesis. And also notice, I usually put a prefix underscore inside my variables, but this can still work even without the underscore. I just use this symbol in order for me to be reminded that this is a variable inside my code. Okay. Also take note, we make use of delimiter in order for us to note that we are changing the symbol of our terminator. So usually our terminator for our SQL command is underscore. So in this instance, we are changing, sorry, underscore, semicolon. So in this instance, we are changing our semicolon to double dollar sign. And then after the code, we use the semicolon again. What is the reason for this? If you will not use a delimiter, and then you use semicolon inside our stored procedure, and then you have a long code, what happens is that it will not properly read your code. Okay, so we are changing the value of our delimiter so that our entire stored procedure will be read as one code. Okay, but for our online compiler, we do not need to declare the delimiter. I will show you the example, but for our online compiler and our PHP workbench. Okay, so these are the values to take note. We do not need the delimiter for our online compiler. I'll remove this. Okay. Okay. Check feature. Okay, so after checking the error, this is the correct statement. Now, first, if you want to create a start procedure using our online editor, this will be the syntax. So create procedure, pair equipment get. As I have said, the only difference between SQL Server and MySQL is that in MySQL there will be no ask, and then the parameter will be inside our open and close parenthesis. Take note, it can accept two types of variable or parameters, input and output. Now, if we did not set or specify any particular type, it will be set as input. And if we are to set a particular type, then it will be set according to that particular type, which could be either input or output. I will show you an example later. First, if you are to create a start procedure, so we create our start procedure. Again, for our online compiler, you need not set the delimiter, but if we are to use PHP myadmin, we need to set the delimiter. So let us run. Okay. So we now have our start procedure. However, what should we do if we are to um, change our start procedure? Now, what you could do is to create a drop statement and then use the create procedure again. So let us try that. Okay. Drop procedure do not include the parameter. There is no need. The drop procedure. Okay. So create it again. Next. But what if we want to do an alter command? If we are to do an alter command, this is will happen in MySQL or MariaDB. So notice there's an error. Why? Because it doesn't accept the alter command. MySQL has a different syntax for that. It's called create or replace procedure. It's the same as that of the alter command. Okay. So that is how we would alter our command. So what if we want to execute this in our PHP workbench? This is how it would work. So this is how it would work for MySQL workbench. Notice delimiter, and then notice at the end we use the delimiter to signify that this is one full code, and then we could use the semicolon to as our line terminator, indicate a new line. Then after that, we use the delimiter again to bring back our semicolon as the line terminator. So if we execute this one, so it's successful. Under stored procedure, you can find it there. However, depending on the version of MySQL Workbench, some command it will not work properly, like the create or replace symbol. So this is based on the version of MySQL or MariaDB you are using, or on the workbench you are using. Even Alter is not working properly. Okay. So anyway, if that is the case, then just drop the procedure and then create the procedure again. Okay. For SQL Server, if you are not sure if a particular start procedure or even a particular object exists, you can use this line of code. This code check if exists, select asterisk from system objects, which is a special system table which contains all of your database objects, where object ID is equals to, find the object ID of n, single quote. okay, which pertains that this is a particular database object. PR equipment by EQ type ID underscore get. And the type is N single quote P, which is and single quote PC, which pertains to the type of stored procedure. So this will check if you have a stored procedure named PR equipment by EQ type ID get. So sometimes, again, depending on the version that you are using, this will work. Sometimes this will not, depending on the version of SQL Server you're using. But this is just a check that you can add to your SQL Server code in order for you to execute a certain command if it exists or not. Okay, so again, we have already um, delved into this example, which is dropping and then creating the start procedure, which could also be written as if object ID PR equipment. It finds if the object ID PR equipment exists. If it does not exist, so in this instance, if object ID PR equipment is not null, meaning it exists, begin drop procedure PR equipment. Okay, so let's try our online compiler will be able to get this code. So PR equipment get, so if object ID PR equipment get drop procedure PR equipment get. Okay, okay, let's try to check. Will work. So this code is only for SQL Server. Okay, so notice our object was deleted. You could also use this one to delete or sorry check for certain tables. If object ID table equipment exists, then do this code. So let us just try. This will work. Then let's just delete this code. Select one. Okay. Okay. Notice it exists. If I change it to a different table, output because that table does not exist. Okay. Next, we will make use of a table called table one. So let us try to create a table one for example. Okay. So let us create a new procedure. So this procedure is called PR get name. So we will get all the values from table one based on the value of X name. So our parameter here is add name, which is varchar 1000. So let us execute. Okay. Then if we want to execute our start procedure, we can actually make use of either the keyword execute or exec. So shorter is better. So we will use execute. Sorry, exec. Example. execute, but I think it's not supported in my SQL Server Management Studio. Execute is supported. So let's see if this is not supported. There are different changes and versions of database management system. So sometimes the code gets dropped or is not supported anymore, but still supported. So execute. If you are getting, we are getting the value of plus x name. So plus. Okay. So let's try exec. We are getting uh, asterisk. Okay. So that's the value of asterisk. Now, what if we want to execute this code using our MariaDB or MySQL data? Okay. Okay. So there seems to be some problem again. So this is quite maarte or sensitive. So I will check first the problem. Okay. So what I did was to add inverted apostrophe symbol. So this symbol denotes a string value for MariaDB or MySQL or for us to minimize the error. So it gets executed. So let's try to remove it. So as you notice, our online editor is quite sensitive. Okay, so it's now working. Same syntax earlier, it was having an error. So right now it's working. So anyway, so PR get name. So how do we call our code in MariaDB or MySQL? In MariaDB or MySQL, we use instead of exec or execute, we use call followed by the start procedure name and then followed by the open close parenthesis, and then inside the open close parenthesis, prepare the parameter. So our first and only parameter is a string, so single quote plus symbol. So let's try to execute and run. Okay, so plus symbol. Let's just update our note. Sometimes it's working in the online compiler and then sometimes it's not working. So better if you have a laptop to just make use of MySQL Workbench and SQL Server Management Studio. If not, well, I just have to make use of our online compilers. The next is, let's say, slash symbol. Okay, and then if symbol is not available, Altering stored procedure. So we have already made an example about this one. So for SQL Server, you need to make use of alter procedure. For MariaDB version, you need to make use of create or replace procedure. So I will just update our code. Set that to Maria. Updated version, we use create or replace procedure. Do not forget the delimiter. So we can use this symbol or dollar symbol and paste the code, keyword, none, begin, and end it with the replacement delimiter, and then reset again to the default delimiter, which is semicolon. In in this, I updated it for the new versions of MariaDB. For old MySQL, just drop it and then create it. Okay. The syntax of this statement is identical to the syntax of the create procedure except for the keyword. The main reason for using this statement is to avoid undesirable effects on permission and dependable database object. So preserves all aspects of original stored procedure. So as I have stated there, it's much better to use the alter procedure statement than to drop and recreate the procedure. Now limits. What are the limits of a stored procedure? So this is for SQL Server. The name of the procedure is a standard TSQL identifier with a maximum length of 128 characters. It may contain up to 2,100 input and output parameters. The body of the stored procedure consists of one or more SQL statement with the maximum body of the stored procedure with the maximum size of the stored procedure code of 128 MB. So imagine that is a very, very long code, 128 MB. Functionality. They can be used to return information to the caller, modify data in the database, implement business logic, control access to the data, improve performance of the system, reduce network traffic, perform other actions of or operations, take notes such as processing email, executing OS commands and processes, and managing other SQL Server objects. There are four ways to receive information from a stored procedure. It can be via result set, input and output parameter, return values, or global cursor, which we will discuss next meeting. For now, we will be discussing returning result set and input and output parameters as well as return values. Returning result set. To obtain the result set from a stored procedure, insert a TSQL statement that returns a result set into the body of the stored procedure. The simplest way is by using a select statement, but you could also call another stored procedure. To take note, you could also call another stored procedure. It is possible to return several result set from one stored procedure. Such a stored procedure will simply contain several select statements. Some data access methods, such as ADO.NET, which is used by Visual Studio, can access all the result set, but others will receive just the first one or possibly even report an error. So this is how we would use input and output parameters in SQL Server. So first is an example using two input parameters. As I have said earlier, when you did not specify the type of parameter in your start procedure, the default is input parameter. So this one, we declare two variables, CHP make and CHP model, and then we find the equipment ID from table equipment where the make is equals to CHP make and the model is equals to CHP model. Basically, the start procedure encapsulates just one select statement. The header and the body of the procedures are divided by the keyword as. The header of the start procedure contains a list of parameters delimited with a comma character. So they are our parameters are separated by comma. Each parameter is defined with an identifier and a data type. Parameter identifiers must begin with the at sign. So if we are to execute the following stored procedure, you could use either exec or execute procedure name followed by our parameters. So take note, we have two string parameters or bar chart. So therefore, we need two string parameters also. We could also execute our stored procedure just by calling the name of the stored procedure without the need to type in execute or exec. But for me, my preferred method is calling exec because it is readable, it is short, and easily understandable. So we have here another example wherein we are getting the value of X name from our table. So it will return this set based on the table wherein X name is Pokemon. And then for my SQL, we also have the same example called PR get name. And then in this example, we are returning only one column. So take note, of course, you just select one column. If you are to return multiple columns, select multiple columns. If you want to return all the columns, use an asterisk in the select statement. Start procedures can return output parameters to the caller. To illustrate, we will create a start procedure similar to the previous one but having one critical difference. It contains an additional parameter. The direction of the parameter is controlled by including the keyword output after the data type. So variable, data type, output. Okay. So in this example, select. So we are using the name of the variable, output variable or output parameter is equals to equipment ID from table equipment. So this one, we use the column EQI ID. EQID from table equipment for make and model equals to okay. So I'll just update our lecture notes. EQID. Take note of the uppercase and lowercase of your examples or of our examples. The select statement does not return a result set as the previous one did. Instead, it assigns an output parameter which is int QID with the selected value. In this case, we require a more complicated batch of SQL statement to execute the start procedure. We must define the variable that will receive the output value. The parameter must be followed by the output keyword to indicate that the value for the parameter will be returned by the procedure. So at the end of the stored procedure, the result is displayed. So for this example, because we are using an output parameter, okay, we will make use of variable declaration, which we will use in order for us to print out or return the value that we want. Okay, so going back to this example, let's try to execute it. Okay, so let's try to execute this one. So first, we declare a variable that will hold the value of our code. Then select statement to make. So let's check the values that we have here. We have make in Japan, and then we have model. Let's see this one. Okay, and then our output is int eqid, eq type id. It will return the eqid. So let us try to run. Should return 3 and identifier 3. So that is how you would use an output parameter. Okay. So for example, we will get values from table underscore one. X name is equal to at name. Then we have ID. So we return the X ID from table one. So let us try to okay, first declare. So we will return an integer at int ID int, and then check target ID a plus, and then what is next? We use our variable together with the keyword output ID. Our output output, and then select ID value. So we will return ID value. So let us try ID to be the type integer. Okay, select, sorry. So it's as, good as for the column name. Okay, so as for the column name ID value. Okay, one. So how about asterisk 4? Okay, so that is how you would use it if you are using SQL Server. This is the example. Okay, another SQL Server example using is not null, drop procedure, select table. Okay, it's basically the same. So you try to do it on your own. Kindly do it and then check what happens. Next, we have an example for MySQL. So let us try to execute table, input and output parameters. Mm, 98, for increment, primary key, not null. Okay. I'll just check our code. Okay, we just use the syntax. There's nothing wrong with the original code. However, as I have said, our online compiler is very troublesome and very, very sensitive. Anyway, after doing this one, let's insert our data. Okay, then double X, okay, name, call, call one, X, call two, okay, name, call two, okay. We were wrong with the column name. Non-column name, Okay, so we have inserted our value. Let us update table sample code. Okay, so after that, so we have one input sample. So we will return all the rows using particular value of ID. Okay, I'll fix this again. Okay, so we have created our procedure. So I just added this symbol, the inverted apostrophe symbol, if I'm not mistaken. That is how you would call it. So take note, be very careful if you are using this symbol because sometimes if you have added a space, you can take a look at this one, it will provide a space and then it will possibly cause errors, especially if you are trying to remove it. Just like if I'm trying to remove this one, I'm getting an error. So be very careful with the spaces if you are using this particular syntax. Okay, so notice the one that I created was deleted, and then this one with the syntax error having the space not getting deleted. Anyway, so we'll execute this one. Okay, and then if we want to execute it, because this is an input parameter, you just call. Okay, call cell table, pr cell table. Okay, so what? Now, what if we want to make use of an output parameter in MySQL? How do we do that? So in order for us to do that, basically we are to use the same code, okay? But instead of putting the output declaration after the data type, we place it before the variable or before the parameter. And instead of using output and input, we use in or out. Are you in or out? Okay, so out. This example, we have PRCell table 2. So we will not provide the in anymore so that it will be a shorter code. So ID will be an input parameter and then underscore name will be an output parameter, which is a string. So in order for you to relegate the variable in, into having a value, what you use is the keyword into. So in SQL Server, what we do is select and then variable name equals the column that you want to get or the column value that you want to get. In MySQL, we do not have that option. Instead, if you want to place a value into a variable, you use column name into variable name. Okay, column name into variable name. So that our output parameter underscore name will have the value of x name. Okay, so let's try to execute this one. Okay, so I will use template here so that we can avoid error. Take note, space, then parameters, and then the code. PRSL table, try to execute. Okay, again, we're encountering an error. Let me fix this first. Okay, so after 10,000 years, if you can use other online editor, please use other online editor as third procedures are having issues in executing even though the code is properly working in the actual um, MySQL workbench. Anyway, just to show you, there are options such as, or there are commands such as drop procedure if exists. Then what happens is it will drop the procedure if it exists. You could use this code if you want to make changes instead of using drop and create. Now, as I have said, you could also make use of create or replace, which will only work if there's already a stored procedure in our uh, database. Okay, so for now, we will make use of this one. Take note, we will have an input parameter of underscore ID and an output parameter of underscore name. We will place the value of x name into underscore name, having an x ID of underscore ID. So if we want to execute our code, we have here call PRSL table and then the ID, the value, which is one, and then we will just declare any variable without the need to declare the data type. So in this example, we are using at pangalan. Select at pangalan will display the value that we got from our output parameter. Hopefully this one will work. Okay, error again. Wallet does not exist. Okay, I will check again. Okay guys, as we are having issues with our online compiler with regards to MariaDB or MySQL, I will make use of PHP Workbench because this codes were actually prepared using Workbench so that at least you can see what should be the outcome or output of our codes. So going back, we have procedure PRSL table 2, which uses an output parameter. Again, output parameter in MySQL should be declared before the variable name or before the parameter name. Unlike SQL Server, which the in or out uh, category of the parameter is placed after the data type. So in this example, we'll declare one input parameter underscore ID and one output parameter underscore name, wherein we will place the value of x name from table x into underscore name. Okay, so let us execute the code. Then, actually, it would be better if you follow on the notes, the attached Word file instead of the notes in our online and bus, because I think there are some characters added by Canvas so that when we copy the code, there are some errors we are encountering. Anyway, if we are to execute this one, we use call and then followed by the start procedure name, followed by the value for our input parameter. And for our output parameter, we will provide a variable. So that variable will be signified by the at symbol. We do not need to declare the data type. It will automatically go to that variable, and whatever particular data type that we have used, it will be set to that variable. So in this instance, we will get the value under at pangalan variable. So once you execute, okay, so we do not have value of 1, about 4. Okay, notice value of 4 is Mika. Okay, how about an input and output parameter? How does an input and output parameter works? Now, an input and output parameter can be used both as an input parameter or an output parameter. It's declared by using the uh, keyword in out. So it can be an input parameter, it can be an output parameter. In this example, what we do is to get the value of x name into our name. And then after doing that, what we do is to set the value of our gotten variable into an additional value through concatenation. So for example here, Mika will have a value of height space Mika. Okay, so once we execute our code, so let us try to run third procedure. In order for us to execute an input output variable, it is the same as that of an ordinary out variable or parameter. So in this instance, call PRCell table 3 for comma at pangalan. Select at pangalan. Hi, Mika. Take note that an input and output parameter can also accept a particular value, and we can also return it. Okay. So for example, we will take our third procedure, so in out, wherein we will, okay, I think this would be a better example. Let me show you a new example for in and out parameter. So in this example, what we do is we call an in out parameter first for counter, for parameter counter, and then an in parameter for ink. So remember, an in out parameter can both pass a value and can return that particular value. Okay, so let us execute this one. So let's try how can use the in out parameter. Okay, so in this example, I have a variable called set at counter is equals to 1. I will use that particular variable and set a set counter into our first parameter, and then second parameter, third parameter, then lastly, I will display the value of counter. So what will happen to the value of counter? becomes 8. Why? Let's break down the code. Okay, this is what happens. In our first instance, we set value of 1 and then pass it to counter variable. So 1, that counter is equals to 1 plus increment of 1. So that becomes 2. So the value of 2 will be set to counter. So in the next iteration, counter here will become 2 with an increment of 1. 2 plus 1 is 3. It will return 3. In the next iteration, 3, increment of 5, 3 plus 5, 8, and return counter. That is how you would use an in out parameter. It can be used as an input parameter, and you could also return the value of that particular parameter. We could also make use of a um, multiple out parameter if you want to return multiple values from a parameter. In this example, notice I use a different symbol for the limiter. So limiter tt, then return to semicolon. So in this example, I will declare three output parameter. First, I have underscore ID, and then I have underscore name, val1 and val2 as my out parameter. Okay. So notice in order for us to transfer the values from table X into the output parameter, I use into X name, X val1, X val2 into name, val1, and val2. So to execute this one, you just need to display or set the variables that will contain the value of our output parameter. So in this instance, I have pangalan 1, halaga 2, and then display the value. I will use concatenation. Okay, so 1, you have no value for 1. How about 4? What is the value of 4? Make a 2. Okay, so if you want to make this more readable, let us add spaces. Okay, okay, Mika 2.2, 2.1. Okay, so that is how you would use our output parameter. There are other examples that you could check in our notes. So kindly check our notes so that if you have an SQL server or a MySQL, you could execute the code by yourself. Going next, using return values. An alternative way to send values from a stored procedure to the caller is to use return value. Each stored procedure can end with a return statement. The statement can be followed by an integer value that can be read by the caller. If the return value is not set, the server will return the default value of 0. Because return values are limited to int data types, they are most often used to signal an error or error code to the caller. First, let's explore in functionality in some examples. In the following example, the value returned by the procedure will be assigned to the local variable and finally returned to the caller. So we have here TR equipment make model list. Okay, it will return the value of the ID. In this example, we did not use begin and end, but you can add begin and end statement so that your syntax will be more readable. Let us try to run. Okay. Then let's try to execute. Make and model. Okay. It will return the ID, keyword, check, sorry. Okay. ID, China, 44. Okay. So what is missing here? We need to declare the variable that will contain the value. Okay. So notice we equate the value of our declared variable to the start procedure, and then that variable will handle or will get the return value, which is an integer. Take note, this is only limited for integer data type. You cannot use any other data type. Okay, 4. Take note, only integers can be returned, including int, small int, and tiny int. We also have long. This method was often used in old versions of SQL Server to return status information to the server. Okay, we have another example here. Now, instead of using and returning column value, what we do is to return a certain code if we encounter an error. Okay, so take note. What we did is return at error. At error is a special keyword which returns an error number if your code or command encounters an error. Otherwise, this will return 0. Okay, so in this example, we use an output parameter in QID, which will return the ID, and then we use another variable called at in error code, which will handle the return value. Okay. So no value is returned. There's no HINA but China. Error code, there's no error code. Okay. China 4. The error code is 0. An error code of 0 indicates a served procedure was executed successfully without any error. We have another example here. So this one will return the total count of column XID from table 1. So we did not use any parameters here. Okay. So to execute, again, we declare a variable that will hold the return value. This instance is called at int variable get total rows from table 1, 4. Okay. Next example, we will use the at row count, which returns the number of affected rows from the previous SQL statement. Okay. So let us remove the comment. Okay. So let me take down the code. We declare two variables, at row and at val. At val is used to get the XID from table 1. It will return all the XID from table 1. Now, why did we set a value for at val? Or why did we use at val to get the value of XID? This will just be a container. Okay, so we just want to contain the command into at val and not select XID from table 1. If we do that, it will return it to our output. So what we do is to set the variable to XID so that it will not display the value of XID in our output, followed by set at row count is equals to at row count. Remember, at row count displays all the affected rows, and then we display at row. So let us execute the command. Okay, again, 4. Okay, the next examples are pretty much the same, so I will not go into it. For MySQL, we do not have any equivalent codes for return values. Okay. Next is default values. If the stored procedure statement has parameters, you must supply values for the parameters in our statement. If the user fails to supply them, the server reports an error. If possible, however, it is possible to assign default values to the parameters so that the user is not required to supply them. Default values are defined at the end of the parameter definition after the data type. All that is needed is an assignment operator and a value. So for example, here we have two parameters and then we use the equal sign, okay, to set a default value of percent, okay, and then we use that in our like statement. So this is a wildcard which returns any particular um, value starting with, okay, the given value. So in this example, we have t percentage, portage percentage. If you use that, it will be displayed. But we could still use it without declaring a particular parameter. So let us execute, try to get code. Okay, okay, try to run. Okay, okay, let's execute. So because we have or we already have default parameters, it means we can use the parameters or we can just leave it blank. So let's say for example, we want to set a default or set a value for all of the parameters. Okay. So notice, how about there's no value for the second parameter, like the first parameter. Okay, all China. How about no value to all the parameter? Okay, everything is returned. How about try this one? This will work. It doesn't work. So it will only work if all the parameters are not used or the last parameter or only the first parameter has value. Okay, so that's the default parameter. Passing parameters by name. You do not have to follow parameter order. If you pass parameter by name, you can just assign it using the add sign to call the particular parameter that you want to call. So in this instance, you can use this one. So for example, uh, add PHP make, which is the second parameter. PHP model equals to x a hash 004. Okay, 04. How about make? Then we have Japan. Okay, all the make of Japan. The opportunity to skip parameters is just one reason for passing parameters by name. More important is the opportunity to create a method that makes the code more readable and maintainable. Although passing parameters by position can be a little faster, passing parameters by name is preferable. Okay, we have further examples here that you could try to do on your own. Now, the samples that we made are only for SQL Server. We do not have any samples of in parameters for MySQL. Okay. The types of stored procedures are the following: user defined or user created, system, which are the provided by the systems, extended, temporary. We also have global temporary. We have remote and CLR. There are also database objects which are similar. For example, we have triggers, which have we have discussed last time. We also have views, which I have also discussed. So views are virtual tables. You could combine one or more tables for a view, and then the result is just like a table. But the purpose of views are for displaying data, not for manipulating it. Okay. We also have user-defined functions. So take note, functions returns particular values. So the difference between stored procedure and functions are that stored procedures can be used to manipulate data. User-defined stored procedures are simply plain stored procedures assembled by administrators or developers for later use. So we have stored procedures examples here that you could try to execute. We have already tackled about the samples here. You could do them. Just make sure you create the table together with the data. There's already explanation, but as I have said, it would be better if you could actually use them inside Management Studio or MySQL Workbench. Okay. In this example, one of the examples that you can find here is adding data using stored procedures. So you can add data using stored procedures using the parameter. Okay. So let me show you this example. We have table employee ID, name, salary, and bonus. Let me create the table first. Okay. So we now have a stored procedure for adding into table employee. So using name, amount, and bonus. Okay. So after executing our stored procedure, or after creating it, we'll now execute it. So we will add the name dotes and then salary and then bonus. Okay. So let us open our table to check if there is dotes. So there is the data for dotes. Okay. Proving the code, what if we want to check if the user already exists? What we can do is to update the data if user already exists. So we will make use of if object ID. Okay. We drop the third procedure if it already exists. We create the procedure. Okay. So what we do is first we declare an int ID which will hold the ID of the existing employee. To get the ID of the existing employee, we perform a select code wherein we check the name if it exists and then we pass it to our int ID. Now, if the int ID's value is greater than zero, meaning there's already uh, an employee using that particular name, what we do is just to update the table employee, update the name, amount, the bonus, okay, using the ID that we have gotten. Now, if there's no such ID, we insert the data. So let's try to see how this one will work. Okay, so we are having an issue. Object ID exists. So just alter. Okay, it was updated. Next, let us check what will happen if we execute this photoy. Okay, then we check the table. So because photoy does not exist yet, will be inserted. But what will happen if get photoy and then what we do is to update salary if it exists and then update the bonus. So it should change the salary and the bonus because photo already exists. So it was. So I just want put an emphasis on the code that we use. Notice we use the if, okay, the if statement. So if the syntax for if statement is if condition, and then if you want, which this one is actually better, if you want to contain the body of your if statement, place it inside the begin and end. Okay. So meaning all the code inside the begin and end after the if statement is part of the if statement. Now, if you have an else code, you can write else and then also begin and end. Then all the code inside the begin and end after the else statement is part of the else statement. Okay. To further improve the code, we will use at row count, which returns the number of affected rows per SQL statement. Okay. So again, we will check if the ID exists. Now, instead of using the ID, we will check for at row count. So at row count greater than zero, meaning there is a record, we will update. Instead of using at ID, we only use the at int ID for the for getting if there's a value of at name, and then we use at row count to check if this query returned any result. If it returned at least one or greater than zero result, we update, and if none, we insert. Okay, let us execute. Then we make use of apply photo. So because photo exists, it should update the salary and the bonus to this value. Now, with different employee, it should insert it. Okay. You can also use the start procedure to delete data. So we will create a start procedure that will delete based on the ID or based on the name. Depending if you have provided a value for ID, it will delete using ID. But if you have provided a name and you did not provide an ID which is greater than zero, it will use the name. So let us try to use this one. Okay. Again, if you provided an ID which is greater than zero, it will delete the employee using the ID. If not, okay, it will check for the name. So in this example, we'll first provide an ID of 1, and then next we will provide the name. Next, I will not provide the name, but I will provide an ID. Let us check. So number one ID of employee was deleted. So next, I will try to provide name of employee, then check what will happen. Okay, so it was deleted. I also provided a sample code wherein all the operations can be made using a variable or a parameter called addOp, which is an integer. If you select one, you can insert, select two, update, select three, delete, select four, select statement. Okay, so let us try to see. So in order for us to use this, remember one is insert, two will be an update statement based on the ID provided, and then three is delete, and then four is select statement. So these are further example. Take note, if you see set no count on, it is just used in order for us to tell SQL Server that we will not display the count on the output, but at row count will still work. That is just the purpose of set no count on. It will not uh, output how many rows change, how many rows were changed, but at row count will still work. There are different examples here. Please try to do them. Okay. Now for MySQL, what we did here for this example is using instead of using add row count, there's an equivalent called found rows. Found rows is the same as at row count. That is the MySQL equivalent. In this example, we will make use of table X. Let us check if there's still table X, name, val, name, and val. Okay. Let us check if this will work. As you have noticed, we are encountering errors using MySQL. Okay, I will first explain what happens here, we have three parameter, input parameter, name, val1, val2. We declare a variable called at id. The purpose of this is that we will place the value of xid into at id when we found the given name from our input parameter. Then to check if we have found the name, we use found rows. If there are rows having that name, we update we update our table. If not, we insert our values. So not quite sure if this will work. Okay, so let me switch to MySQL Server Workbench. Okay, so this is our code. I have already executed it. So, or I have already created the third procedure. So we will now execute it. I will insert Mel. Okay, let us check table. So we have Mel here. Now what if I will again insert Mel, but this time having a value of, so it should change equal 1 to 244 and equal to 2, 1, 2, 3, 2, 2, 4, 1, 2, 3. Okay, so it's working perfectly. Now what if I want to create a stored procedure that will be able to process all the data that I want? Insert, update, delete, and select. So in this example, what I did was to make use of if statement. You could also use if then else if you want, but in this example, if is preferable because we have four options. Now, in SQL Server, if you are to declare an if statement, you just need if followed by the condition followed by begin and end in order for you to encapsulate the content of that statement. Now, for MySQL, the difference is that number one, after the condition, use the keyword then. Okay. Number two, after your statement, you do not need begin and end here, but you need an end if statement to denote that you have already finished your if statement. So then and if are a requirement together with, of course, the semicolon sign. So in here, one is insert, two is update. If the ID exists, but if not, it will display no data to update. Then for number three, it is delete. If it has not found the ID, it will say no data to delete. And for number four, it will select the given ID. Okay, but executed this one. So let us run the code. Okay. First line, column value 1. So there is an error. Okay, I'm sorry. So it's missing underscore. Okay. Okay, so let's execute. I've inserted mama. So mama X. I will update. Okay, I will update ID 3 to nanay with a value of 1 and 2. ID 3. So Miko will become nanay, value of 1 and 2. Execute. Nanay 1 and 2. Next, I will delete ID 3. So nanay will be deleted. Okay. Nanay was deleted. And then lastly, I will display the value of ID number 4. Okay, so that is how you would do it using MySQL. Okay, thank you guys for your time. And if you have any questions, just give me a message at our Discord channel. And also prepare for the assignment that I will be giving out for this particular lecture. Thank you and have a good day.